Hello and welcome to Let's Talk SEO. As most people might remember, last year when AI Reviews was first introduced, I said that Google has probably already prepared for a whole host of lawsuits coming their way. And so the latest lawsuit comes from the UK by UK publishers. Mainly, these are news publishers, maybe some bloggers and stuff in between. And the reason why this is significant is the UK, regardless of what your thoughts are about the country, is leading the way when it comes to reforming how AI works within the country. And so while the US is maybe 20 times the size of the UK, which is a small island, I don't see any lawsuits by publishers, by bloggers, by writers who are probably more impacted uh, in the US because there are way more people in the US making their money online um, because there are very more people in the US than they are in the UK. But the publishers are not suing Google for stealing their traffic, for stealing their content via AI. And so last month, the CMA, or the Competition and Markets Authority, uh, proposed to designate Google with strategic market status in search. And so primarily what the CMA did was it made it possible starting October for publishers to opt out of their website showing in AI overviews or being scraped by AI without impacting their visibility in organic. And so the article here is search in the UK. So Google search accounts for more than 90% of all general search queries in the UK, with millions of people relying on it as a key gateway to the internet, and more than 200,000 businesses in the UK relying on Google search advertising to reach their customers. These services matter to our economy and society, so it's vital that competition works well. And so you can see the figures are not huge in the UK as they are in the US, where I don't see as much action. The CMA's investigation has heard concerns including Google's index of billions of websites, its access to trillions of historical searches, and its ecosystem of information that are extremely hard for others to replicate. Higher costs of search advertising that would be expected in a more competitive market, limited transparency and fairness in how Google ranks and presents search results. Publishers can face challenges in securing fair terms and control over how their content is used in Google's search and AI generated responses. Default agreements with mobile device manufacturers can make it even more difficult for competitors to reach customers. Innovative businesses can struggle to compete as people can't easily share their search data with firms developing new services. And so the CMA has, in a nutshell, pretty much knocked Google on the head. Now, for now, there's absolutely no action going on. And there's a link to the article if you want to read it in its entirety in the description. But these are the first steps that the UK is taking towards curbing the negative impact that AI overviews is having on website owners, news site owners, bloggers, anyone who creates content on the internet. And there is a reason why this is so important apart from it having an impact in the UK, because usually what I've seen is what starts in the UK does not end in the UK. So you would see something like this in the UK, and then that will then cascade across to the rest of Europe, eventually making its way in the US. And sometimes it might not make its way into the US, but most times, publishers in the US, people in the US will see that this has been really effective in the UK or in Europe. We want to do the same thing in the US, and so that is where the impact there is kind of like an impact, but it's still hard to say. And now the latest news comes in, and this is from, I think, 3 days ago. This is from the 4th of July. And Google's AI overviews hit by EU antitrust complaint from independent publishers. And so this is very interesting for a number of reasons, which I'll go into. And so it says, Alphabet's Google has been hit by an EU antitrust complaint and over its AI overviews from a group of independent publishers. So these are not large publishing houses, which also asked for an interim measure to prevent allegedly irreparable harm to them, according to a document seen by Reuters. Now, the response that the Google rep gives is very funny, and I'll go into that a little later in this video. But it says Google's AI overviews are AI generated summaries that appear above traditional hyperlinks to relevant web pages and are shown to users in more than 100 countries. It began adding advertisements to AI overviews last May. The document here says Google's core search engine service is misusing web content for Google AI overviews in Google search, which have caused and continue to cause significant harm to publishers, including news publishers, in the form of traffic, readership, and revenue. So this is the document this is part of the document that has been submitted to the EU antitrust body. And what it says here, it said Google's position in AI overviews at the top of its general search results page displayed its own summary. So then it goes on to say publishers using Google search do not have the option to opt out of their material being ingested for Google's AI large language models training and or being crawled for summaries without losing their ability to appear in Google general search results. And so what you're seeing here is what it originally started with the CMA in the UK, maybe like a month or so ago, and that was news, and there's a link to that in the description, that is now cascading to the EU as a whole. So this is going to be to the entirety of Europe. And so this is the first step to curbing AI overviews from stealing people's content. And with that happening, you will now probably, now it's hard to say at this point what the commission will do, what steps will be taken, but it's clear that these publishers are saying, you know what, we do not want Google to be crawling our content and stealing it under the guise of it being an AI overview and supposedly, allegedly being helpful for users, because while it might be very helpful for users, it's still a form of piracy, it's still a form of copyright infringement, because you're doing it without the permission of the publisher, and I don't see why this is so hard to understand. So here's what Google says. New AI experiences in search enables people to ask even more questions, which creates new opportunities for content and businesses to be discovered, a Google spokesperson said. The problem with this statement is it's not true. If you look at the data, while people may be conducting more searches, they're still remaining on Google's own platform. So they're not necessarily going to your website. They're not necessarily coming to my website, especially if I make money off my content. So if I offer a service, that's a totally different thing. If I sell products, that's a totally different thing. But if I make money off my content and my content is really good, I rely on that traffic coming to my website. And if AI overviews presents my content right within search results itself, then there's no reason for someone to come and visit my website, click on my advertising, or click on my newsletter, or get an email from me, or even know who I am, because they'll just get the answer for AI overviews. And so they will remain on Google if they have any follow-up questions. And this is where this is so funny, is because it just disregards the fact that the AI overviews is damaging publishers. And there's more to this. Numerous claims about traffic from search are often based on highly incomplete and skewed data. So here's what Google says. The reality is that sites can gain and lose traffic for a variety of reasons, including seasonal demand, interests of users, and regular algorithmic updates to search. Really? So weren't we impacted by this before? Why are we seeing the so-called separation of impressions and clicks that's even wider apart than it was maybe 2 years or 3 years ago, where there were still algorithmic updates, there were still seasonal issues, there were still all of these factors were still there. It's the only thing that's changed is Google has injected these AI overviews that has made making a living for bloggers and content creators almost impossible. And so by Google saying that the data is skewed, why does not Google present us with the real data? Why does Google present us with skewed data? Why don't we see data regarding how much traffic AI overviews is sending our website? Why isn't that available in Google Search Console and Google Analytics? Clearly, Google has something to hide and they are hiding it. So in addition to this, there have been 3 groups have filed similar complaint and have requested an interim measure to the UK Competition Authority. The complaints echoed a US lawsuit by a US edtech company which said Google's AI overviews is eroding demand for original content and undermining publishers' ability to compete, that have resulted in a drop in visitors and subscribers. And so if you thought that AI overviews is going to be bulletproof and this is going to be forever, it's not really going to be the case, because as I mentioned, I tell all my clients, when something new comes in, people kind of jump onto it. People think, all right, this is going to damage the industry or whatever it happens. But a lot of this has to do with how this plays out legally, because if content creators are not paid for their content, or they don't receive visitors for their content, and there's no compensation for it, there's no motivation to create new content. And so at the end of the day, Google is the snake that's eating itself. And so these lawsuits is what will put Google in check. And hopefully, sooner rather than later,